新世纪新旅程新疗愈，各位观众朋友大家好，我是张中岳，非常欢迎各位收看爱光心语节目。我们知道呢，这是一个爱的世界，而在这个世界里面呢，其实充满了各色各样的人。而我们现在看到的全世界有一个共同的问题，就是人口趋向于老龄化。这个是每一个国家所要面对的，就是面对这个日渐老化的这些老年的人口，怎么样去照顾他们？我们都知道，医疗是一件很重要的事，所以在医疗上面呢，大家都给予了很多的付出。但是在医疗的背后呢，我们看到了人类的身体的问题，是只有身体上的疾病吗？其实还有心理上面的问题，所以把医疗和人类的行为学能够结合在一起，我想这是一个比较新的观念。那今天呢，在我们的节目当中，我们非常荣幸的能够邀请到的一位特别来宾呢，他是源自于美国哈佛大学而来的Professor Kleinman。我要特别介绍一下凯博文教授哦。凯博文教授的背景呢，他是哈佛大学的医学院精神病学还有医疗人类学的教授。而且凯博文教授呢，他有一个非常特别的背景，他是美国国家医学科学院和国家文理学院的2个院的院士，他的学术地位非常的崇高，而且他也在这个全世界桃李满天下。像这样因为难得的前辈呢，而且他一直钻研于医学跟人类行为学，把这2个结合起来呢，今天也特别接受到我们的访问，所以非常感谢哦，感谢 Professor Kleinman， welcome to our program。
谢谢你，谢谢你，Cindy，我很高兴会来碰来到，
是，
就是台湾是有一个特别的地方在我的心里，因为我中文说的不太好，可是听得懂，我想最好我用英语。1969年第一次我来了台湾做研究。1969, I came to Taiwan. I was at the 美国海军研究所 at the Navy Medical Unit number 2 at 台大医院 at National Taiwan University Hospital. And my first research at that time was meant to describe what was the system, Situng, sort of Genkang Situng, the system of health and the system of public health in Taiwan. And my first impression was that there was a difference between what the Weishengbu, the Ministry of Health, said and how people actually lived. And the difference was that for the Weishengbu, the only part of the public health system were hospitals, EUN, clinics, Munjan, Yaopu, pharmacies, and that was it. But for the people, health was much broader, I could see. They were practicing Yanglao, Yangshen. They were looking at their diet, using ideas of yin yang and other traditional ideas to balance their diet. They were going to Zhengyi, Lao Zhengyi, and to all kinds of healers, Wu Yi 台湾的 shamans 的怎么说是
民间信仰。
对。So all these practices suggested that medicine and healthcare were very different than the government understood it to be. And this was not just true in Taiwan, where I started my research, but also true in the United States and true in China, and all over the world, that all over the world, the people use the healthcare system very differently than the professionals understand it to be. And they use it broadly, from food and exercise all the way to seeing different kinds of practitioners. Okay. And so my first set of studies came out in a book called Patients and Healers in the Context of Culture. And I studied the Yuan Guanxi, 还有老中医的关系跟病人，还有当医，你知道当医是巫医的关系都有，我们都看，对，去台湾话的，对。So Taiwan helped me greatly to reconsider the whole domain of health and to see it much broader than was being seen by medicine. Medicine and public health were very narrow at that time. And also, I came to have lots of friends in Taiwan and to have a very good time here, and to be particularly active in the area of psychiatry, of Jinsenbing. And in that area, Jinsenbing is a big area. I was interested in people who came in with symptoms, Junzhuang, like Menmen Bula or Xinli Bushufu, and who organized their ideas in an old concept of illness that we don't use anymore, called Xinxing Shuairou, neurasthenia, okay?
Yeah.
And I was interested in what their emotions were and how they expressed them. And I was one of the first people to show that there was much more depression in Taiwan and later in China than people recognized, because people did not complain of being depressed, but complained of headaches, totung, toun, dizziness, pilau, fatigue. They complained of different bodily symptoms, but didn't complain of psychological symptoms. That's all changed. In 50 years, that's all changed. So now you have in Taiwan a thriving psychotherapy. Young people don't hesitate, like Americans, like Frenchmen, like Japanese. They all talk about feelings, okay? Your program is the term "I." That was a term you wouldn't hear in Taiwan in 1969. You didn't talk about love at that time.
I'm very wondering why you choose Taiwan and then mainland China. Why you like here?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the difference between the Western?
The reason I came to Taiwan was that it was the Vietnam War era, and I was in at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health in America. And my wife, who died 7 years ago from Alzheimer's disease, she was a white like me, Caucasian, but she was a very fine China scholar. And so she was a Guwen Jiaoshou. And it's because of her interest that we first came to Taiwan. And then when we came, I discovered many things as I studied Chinese and made friends and the like. At first, I thought that everything was very different. At first, the first few months, I remember being here. I thought everything was very different. In America, we eat for breakfast, we eat cereal or eggs. We don't eat chiffon with yu or ro. Okay, we don't eat that.
Yeah.
And also, I found the people's customs were quite different. So I used to hold my wife's hand sometimes, and old people would come up to me and say, 不好意思，你不要，你不需要in public，在公里的地方 show your emotions.
Yeah.
There were lots of things that were different. Then the longer I stayed then for 2 years, 69 through 70. By the time I left in 1970, I had completely the opposite perspective. I thought everything was similar. Everything was similar, struck me, as you got to know people. But I think that also was wrong, And over the years, what I've learned is that the deeper you go, there are both similarities and differences. And it's important to understand both similarities and differences. So when people are depressed, have depression, and they experience it physically in the body, but don't talk about it psychologically, that is actually a completely 他们的体验, 他们的经验, 真不一样, completely different with people who experience depression psychologically, okay? Now, Chinese can experience it both ways. So can Americans. And so my interest has been not just how culture affects illness, but what's the point of studying illness? Why do we study illness? We don't study illness to simply put it in a book or categorize it. We study it to help people get better, That's called care. An old Chinese term for care is guan. There are many terms in Chinese for care. This is about caregiving. And so my whole career has centered on caregiving, on what is caregiving, how does it differ in Yazhou, Ozhou, Feizhou, America. How does care differ? And that's what my interest is. And what I have come to realize over time is that Chinese society, from 古代化的到现代化, has had a lot of interest in this field. So part of this is the idea of cultivating the self, self-cultivation. That's both physical cultivation, cultivation of the body, but cultivation of the mind. It's what we call self-care, self-care. I've become very, very interested in that. How do we improve people's self-care? And also, I'm very interested in the guanxi, the relationships between patients and doctors. 病人跟医生的关系. And what I have found is, I've been doing many studies in China on this, not in Taiwan. What I have found in recent years is that there's a yuan guanxi 问题. There's a real problem, especially in China, but even in the United States, with the relationships between doctors and patients. And this also relates to my experience in Taiwan. Because when I first came to Taiwan, the yuan guanxi, the doctor was like a king, Huang, okay?
Right.
The patient like a subject, down, 他们的下的三弟. But now it's changed, reversed, almost reversed. So now the patient is the king, and the doctor has gone down in status. And my feeling is that both of those are not so good, that you want to have a doctor-patient relationship that's equal, of equals, in which they help each other, they collaborate. They work together on things. So that's been my interest, yeah.
That's very interesting. I have another question. One of the topics you have focused on in your writing is about suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. Suffering, up to now, we can find over 70 years younger generation are occupying their minds with career option, action, sports, like World Cup games. Please tell us why you think you should care about suffering.
Suffering.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's an excellent need 问题非常好. So this question is, why spend time studying suffering in a world when people are more interested in entertainment and sports and things like that? And that's because suffering, pain and suffering, pain and suffering are basic to the human experience. We all go through this. Some go through it to a greater degree than others. So when I first came to Taiwan in 1969, many people remembered R.R. Ba. Okay? And there was a lot of anger and difficult feelings about the suffering that people went through at that time. And your society then was divided in that regard. And most of my friends were Taiwanese, Taiwan run, but most of my wife's friends, she worked at the Boguan. Most of her friends were Waishan run, were mainlanders. Okay. So we both saw two completely different views of this, two completely different views. And I realized that in suffering, one of the problems of suffering is what perspective, your shema ijen, which point of view do you take to look at it? So what's very important is to see it in historical perspective. So I did the first study in China by a non-Chinese, by someone who wasn't Chinese, of the Wunhua Dago Ming's Yoshima Jegwo. Okay? I studied the impact of the Wunhua Dago Ming on people, Cultural Revolution. It was a big trauma, had lots of difficult effects on people. And it made me realize that, yes, there are big historical sufferings, but there also are everyday suffering, putongda sufferings, ordinary sufferings, which are illness, bad fortune, family problems, business problems. Okay? And my concern was, why do we avoid spending time to think about these things? Why do we avoid it? And I think the reason we avoid this is that it upsets us to see life the way it really is. Life is a balance between good things and bad things. Yeah. I was married for 46 years, okay? My wife was very beautiful, very bright, and for the first 35 years, she took care of me. Okay? Then she developed Alzheimer's disease, and for 10 years, I took care of her. Yeah. We had 35 wonderful years and 10 very difficult years. But those 10 difficult years balanced the 35 wonderful years. They came together. You have good times and bad times. Even when my wife had terrible Alzheimer's, we still sometimes had a good time. Much of the time we didn't. We had problems. But sometimes we had a good time. Could be joyous. You can still, your program is about love. You can still have love in a situation of a family caregiver and a patient with dementia. You can still have love, okay? In fact, in some ways, the love becomes deeper as you begin to realize the reality of life, that life is not just sports and not just going to the movies and not just good food, but that life is all these things taken together. Yeah.
Yeah. The final question is about your current research. We noticed that you are paying attention to the issue of population aging in Asian society. We know that Asia, including Taiwan and Japan, is moving toward an aging society rapidly. What do you think we should do to copy?
Excellent. Yeah. So 这个是老年人的问题，这个是老年人的问题。This is about old people. 现在我是77岁。Actually, I'm 78岁，77 years, and so 现在我比较老，可是我的身体很好，心理非常好，我脑筋没有问题， 因为将来我一定有问题。Everybody has problems, right? So we have to get ready for a population that's older and that has problems. And we call these people frail elderly. Frail elderly. Frail, 我不知道中文的脆弱。Okay, 好的。And so frail elderly, they cannot move well. They cannot walk too well. They have to use a walker, or maybe even can't walk in a wheelchair. Their eyes are not so good, hearing bad. They're easily have stomach problems, cardiac problems, skin problems, all kinds of problems. The elderly people need help. Now, what kind of help do they need? They need someone who they can rely on to help them. That could be a family member, a wife, a husband, adult children. But for many people, even that is not enough. So they need someone like a baoan or a hugong, someone who can help during the day with things. So this becomes, first of all, a problem of医疗费, of insurance, okay? In America, there's no insurance for long-term care. In Japan, there is. I don't know about Taiwan. Japan has that. China doesn't have that, okay? But even Japan will not be able to keep that going because the elderly population is too big, okay? So how will we deal with this in the future? Who will give the care? And as a result of that, I've become very interested in technology, technologies for frail elderly, okay? So the technologies we're looking at are, some are exoskeletons. An exoskeleton, you put your arms into it, and it magnifies your strength. So you can lift someone out of a bed or into a wheelchair. Or you can put it on your legs, and someone who has stroke can walk normally. Someone who has Parkinsonism can walk normally. So that's a wonderful development. This is a wonderful development. There are also new wheelchairs for poor people living in rural areas. They're wheelchairs you can use by hand that move so effectively you can go uphill or go over a real railroad track or something. There also are monitors. So if someone falls, you're aware of it, and people can go there and help that person so they don't die by falling to the ground. You know, falling is very important. When you're my age in America, every year, 1/3 of people over 70 years of age have a fall, okay? So falling is important. So now the technology is important, but it's not enough, okay? It's not enough. Technology is essential, but not enough. You need a social system, 社会系统, which helps you use the technology effectively for people. So think about people who are not rich people, who are ordinary middle-class people. How will they have access to these technologies? They'll have to be shared in some way. They'll have to be used in community groups. And like, what sort of social system, what sort of 社会系统 will make that possible? That's what I'm very interested in. I'm very interested in how you do this, and I'm particularly interested, to be frank, I'm particularly interested in poor people, okay? So I think the middle class, you and I are middle class, we'll be able to buy some of these things, and we'll be able to afford a gungan or a hugong or a baoan. But what about poor people? And so my interest today is about how you can deliver these technologies in social systems for poor people.
谢谢 Professor Kleinman，今天接受我们的访问，和我们分享了这么多 你的经验，而且也给了我们很多的知识学习，也非常谢谢，因为你在下面还有一个专题的演讲。
对对对。
对，也祝您在台湾之行旅途愉快，一切都很顺利。
谢谢你给我很多的帮助。
谢谢，也我们的观众朋友们也很高兴今天能够听到您的分享。
非常好。
对，谢谢。
谢谢。
谢谢。